It's one of those things that's been a target for politicians for some time because it's a very easy political message to sell. You're going after the big institutions that are crowding out the individual home buyers, making prices too expensive. But at the end of the day, these are well-run institutional landlords of rental homes, not unlike apartment homes. And I think that at the end of the day, if what he is suggesting he wants to do gets done in some capacity, the net result probably winds up being less home inventory. Which probably ends up offsetting any positive impact on pricing that he would be looking to accomplish.
Well, I don't know much about this business, but how big is institutional ownership of residential real estate in the U.S. these days?
It's tiny. I've seen numbers. It's only a couple % of the overall housing stock. Maybe a little bit more of the overall rental housing stock. But at the end of the day, it's a majority of what is owned, single-family homes that are rented are owned by mom and pop small investors rather than the large institutions. But clearly the large institutions have the buying power, and that's what's being targeted here.
I guess in some fashion, the president and his administration are going after the high cost of housing, or the lack of affordability of housing in this country. From your REIT perspective, what's going on there? How do we get ourselves here, and maybe how do we fix this situation?
Well, the reason that there's a housing affordability issue is because there hasn't been enough built for an extended period of time, and we're undersupplied. And the way to get out of that is to increase supply. And anything that you do from an administrative or regulatory perspective that caps incentive to build new supply is the real problem here for pricing. Right now, rentals are more affordable than buying a home. I think that's pretty well understood across the board. There's not enough incentive for builders of either single family or multifamily right now to increase the housing supply, which really is needed to improve affordability.
So what do the developers, what are they arguing for? Like, are there specific remedies they're looking for in terms of permitting, just regulatory hurdles to build?
Yeah, basically that's the key, is improved ease of permitting. Maybe some public-private partnerships where there's some government input in tax incentives or things of that nature. Obviously, in markets like New York here, the ability to more easily convert old office buildings into rental housing. But on the single-family side, which is what this is really targeting, one of the things that the builders are doing right now is selling their inventory to institutions who will own it and rent it. And that's being targeted. And if you take away that buyer, then it makes it harder for them to build if they don't necessarily feel confident they're going to be able to sell their inventory at the end of the day.
Are building restrictions, they're local, right? They're not federal, are they?
Correct. The permitting process and the regulations on housing are at the local level.
So, is this something, are certain states, certain areas, is it easier to build, harder to build? I would think in New York City it'd be terribly hard to build something.
Yeah, you can look broad geographic strokes. Areas in the Sun Belt are historically much easier to build. Yep. Obviously, there's much more land, but also the regulatory environment is easier. And so that's where there's historically been significant more construction, and the demand has followed. And so it typically supply and demand work on their own, and the government stays out of it. The federal government stays out of it, and so at the end of the day, I'm not really sure exactly what's going to be able to be done here. It feels like banning specific owners of properties from playing in a private market transaction is interesting. We'll see. We'll see. But clearly, he's making life difficult for these companies.